Picture this: grain silos across America's heartland standing half empty, not because the harvest failed, but because the guest of honor never showed up. The soybeans are ready, the elevators are open, but China, once the kingdom's most loyal suitor, has vanished from the ballroom without so much as a goodbye note. This isn't a minor snub. Last year, Beijing bought more than half of all U.S. soybean exports. This year, not a single bushel of the new crop. Zero. Zilch. For farmers from Iowa to Indiana, it's like throwing a lavish banquet only to discover the guest list was forged, and now the turkey, the wine, and the band are all going to waste. The silence feels intentional, even cruel. Complete ghosting on an industrial scale, as one agriculture reporter put it. Imagine texting your partner back instantly, day after day, and getting nothing but blue ticks in return. Then one morning, you discover they've already moved on. Brazil is the new sweetheart, dancing away in full view while American soybeans sit in storage, starting to smell like rejection. And here lies the paradox. U.S. soybeans are actually cheaper than Brazil's by nearly 70 cents a bushel. Bargain beans and still no takers. It's the kind of irony that makes farmers wonder if they just produce the world's most expensive birdseed. As one North Dakota elevator manager admitted, some of us aren't even looking at buying soybeans this fall. Why bother when the royal carriage to China isn't coming? For the men and women who till this land, it's more than a bad season. It's existential. Soybeans aren't a hobby crop. They're the lifeblood of rural economies, collateral for bank loans, the reason kids can go to college and grandparents can keep the family farm. Without buyers, futures prices wobble, basis widens, and the bills start to look like daggers. It's less than amber waves of grain and more amber alert for farmers. The silence, of course, isn't about soybeans alone. It's a political opera with an agricultural stage. Everyone knows the backstory. Tariffs, trade wars, and a diplomatic game of chicken where American farmers are now the unfortunate passengers. As one online commentator sneered, when you piss off your biggest customer, what do you expect he will do? Find another seller who treats him better. Brutal words, but they capture the raw truth. Meanwhile, public sentiment has morphed into a chorus of I told you so's. Most American farmers were MAGA. Most MAGA hate China. Now American farmers are asking, why did China stop buying from us? Another went further. The hypocrisy of these farmers is staggering. They are simply reaping what they sowed with their votes. Fair or not, the court of public opinion has little sympathy for the soybean kingdom. And yet, beneath the sarcasm and schadenfreude, there's a real tragedy. These farmers didn't design tariff schedules or craft campaign slogans. They planted, harvested, and trusted that global trade would keep its promises. Now, with the October to December export window slipping away, they find themselves caught in the crossfire of giants. So here we are, silos swelling with unsold beans, futures markets jittering, and a silence from Beijing that echoes louder than any insult. For America's soybean kingdom, it's not just a missing trade partner. It's the disappearance of a crown consort, a consort who once devoured half the feast, and whose absence now leaves the hall echoing with hunger. And the question hanging over every farmhouse kitchen table? Not why did they leave, but the harder one. What if they never come back? Once upon a tariff, the United States thought it could lecture its most important customer and still expect loyalty at the checkout counter. Back in 2018, Washington rolled out tariffs like royal decrees, slapping Chinese goods with hefty taxes in the name of national strength. Beijing replied in kind, and soybeans, America's agricultural crown jewel, were one of the first hostages. Fast forward to today, and those duties linger like a curse on the kingdom. Even after pauses, truces, and carefully worded dialogues, American beans still carry a 23% tariff at Chinese ports. In trade terms, that's like walking into a market with a surcharge stamped across your forehead. No matter how golden the crop looks, it isn't cheap enough once you add the tariff toll. And yet, amid this gloomy backdrop came the strangely cheerful announcement of a soybean breakfast in Washington. Imagine it, croissants, coffee, and a room full of officials pretending that cordial conversation might erase years of bruised egos. Chinese Ambassador Xie Feng played the polite guest, speaking warmly of cooperation. On the other side, the American Soybean Association looked less like a dignitary and more like a desperate host, pleading for China to please keep buying. China is our most important trading partner, Jana Fritz reminded the gathering, as though repetition alone could conjure contracts. Her words were heartfelt, but they carried a faint sound of begging. When she insisted, "We want to continue those negotiations so that we can provide that product to the Chinese people," it was hard not to hear a note of panic under the diplomatic polish. Meanwhile, outside the breakfast hall, the math looked merciless. In 2018, a third of America's soybean crop went straight to China. By 2023, it had fallen to barely a quarter. And this year, a neat round zero. No purchases on the books, even as harvest trucks rumble into elevators. Brazil, of course, had been more than happy to scoop up the courtship. But here's the twist. The U.S. insists it still holds cards to play. Officials whispered about informal negotiations with China's vice commerce minister, and trade representatives hinted that the tariff tiff might thaw. The idea is simple. If China would just buy a few million tons of beans, it would smooth the way for a broader deal, perhaps even a presidential summit. That's the theory. The reality? Silence speaks louder. As one sarcastic commenter wrote online, "You started a trade war with China, but you want China to buy your soybeans." Another added, "When you piss off your biggest customer, what do you expect he will do?" The chorus outside the palace gates is unsparing, and in its own way, it mirrors Beijing's icy negotiation tactic. Don't say no, just don't say anything at all. This is the cruel beauty of tariffs. They were meant as a weapon of leverage, but they've turned into shackles on the very farmers they were supposed to protect. Each season that goes by without Chinese orders is another reminder that royal decrees might stir headlines, but they don't fill silos. And so the kingdom finds itself staging breakfast banquets, hoping polite gestures can reverse years of acrimony. But as the croissant crumbs are cleared away, one truth lingers in the air. Diplomacy served on fine china doesn't guarantee China will show up at the market.
Every royal scandal needs a rival family waiting in the wings. And for America's soybean kingdom, that rival wears green and yellow. While U.S. farmers were staring at empty order books, Brazil was already dancing with the crown consort, twirling across the ballroom floor with contracts signed months in advance. China, after all, is nothing if not practical. Faced with tariffs on American beans, they didn't sulk, they shopped. By April, Beijing had secured millions of tons from Brazil, complete with long-term supply agreements that stretch well past a single season. September brought another 8 million tons. October, another 4 million. And just like that, Brazil wasn't just a date, it was a steady partner. The numbers are staggering. In 2024 alone, China imported nearly 75 million tons of soybeans from Brazil, making up more than 70% of its total imports. That's not a fling, that's a marriage. Even more insulting for Washington, some of these deals are being settled in Chinese yuan instead of US dollars. For Beijing, it's both a food security plan and a subtle geopolitical flex, cutting out the greenback while feeding its people. For Brazilian farmers, this saga has been a coronation. Prices rose, demand surged, and the countryside pulsed with new wealth. The world's second largest soybean producer suddenly looked like the first in line for the throne. As a Brazilian, this is a movie I am loving watching, one gloating commenter admitted online, capturing the mix of triumph and schadenfreude felt across South America. Meanwhile, American farmers could only watch as their former suitor posted pictures from the honeymoon. Brazil is China's new boyfriend now, one U.S. agriculture journalist quipped, and the metaphor stuck because it feels so apt. The U.S. may have the cheaper beans this season, but reliability trumps romance. For Beijing, Brazil offered consistency, cooperation, and none of the political drama. The irony bites hard. For decades, U.S. officials assumed China couldn't live without American soybeans. But dependence is a dangerous illusion. With Brazil expanding acreage and Argentina, Russia, and even Africa circling the market, China has options, and it's exercising them with the cold efficiency of a monarch picking heirs. At the same time, Washington still talks as if it's in control. Former President Trump recently urged China to massively step up purchases of U.S. beans, as though a royal decree could undo years of courtship elsewhere. Online, the reaction was savage. You don't want to sell things to China. Then China decided not to buy. Happy now? Another chimed in. This is literally what most farmers voted for.
Beyond the mockery, there's a sober truth. Markets don't wait for bride to heal. Contracts signed with Brazil today ripple forward into years of locked-in supply. And with South America blessed by favorable weather and expanding infrastructure, the U.S. risks becoming a second-choice suitor, called upon only when Brazil's carriage breaks down. In the grand drama of global trade, House Brazil has stolen the spotlight, crowned itself China's preferred partner, and left America sulking in the wings. And if Washington still believes this is a temporary arrangement, it might be time to reread the vows. For now, China's hand is spoken for, and the dance floor is crowded with rivals eager to keep it that way. Every troubled kingdom eventually turns to its alchemists, those clever men and women who promise to turn crisis into gold. For America's soybean realm, the alchemy of the moment is called biofuel, a shimmering potion meant to transform unwanted beans into renewable riches. If China won't buy them, perhaps jet engines and diesel trucks will. And on parchment, the formula looks dazzling. Washington has delivered a trifecta of policy blessings: higher than expected blending mandates for biomass-based diesel, extensions of the precious 45Z tax credit, and a long-awaited crackdown on small refinery exemptions that once diluted demand. Add to this a proposed 30% expansion in soybean crush capacity, factories that will turn beans into oil and meal, and you have the makings of a Renergy revolution. The court alchemists are practically giddy, promising that every unsold bushel might one day fuel a plane, power a truck, or greenwash a corporate annual report. But here's the rub. Magic takes time. The new demand for renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel won't materialize until next year at best. Farmers need salvation now, not after another planting season. One trade analyst was blunt. No matter how bullish you want to get on biofuels, it doesn't replace China on the soybean export side. Translation: a shiny potion, yes, but not an antidote to losing the world's hungriest customer. Consider the scale of the problem. China imports more soybeans than the rest of the planet combined. A single lost Chinese contract can outweigh months of domestic biofuel growth. The optimistic estimates suggest that even with expanded crush and policy support, U.S. biofuels might soak up only a fraction of the surplus. The silos would bulge, the basis would still sag, and farmers would still stare at unsent invoices. That hasn't stopped officials from selling the narrative. In speeches, they frame biofuels as not just an economic lifeline, but a patriotic mission: clean energy, rural jobs, and independence from foreign buyers. And in fairness, the strategy does play well in certain halls of power. But out in the countryside, among farmers staring at fields worth less than the cost of planting them, the promises sound suspiciously like fairy lust. Public opinion, meanwhile, is less than forgiving. "You voted for this," jeered a one commenter, mocking farm country loyalty to the very policies that triggered today's mess. Another wrote, "Farmers didn't create the trade war." Wrong. They elected the clown who started it. Against this chorus of cynicism, the notion of salvation through tax credits and refinery rules feels almost quaint, like telling a bankrupt duke that at least the castle has new curtains. Still, the alchemists continue their work. By late October, the EPA will finalize volumes that could expand biomass-based diesel by 67%. Treasury guidance may add certainty to investment. If everything aligns, the U.S. soybean industry could indeed enter a golden age of renewable fuels. But even in that optimistic scenario, one truth remains: domestic energy markets can never fully replace the feast China once provided. In the royal drama of soybeans, biofuels are not a new crown consort. They are a clever disguise, a court magician's trick to buy time. Useful, yes. Impressive, perhaps. But when the applause fades, the granaries are still full, and the kingdom still waits for a suitor who may never return.